Hello and welcome back to the Securing Industry podcast. This is where I interview specialists from the world of OT and industrial security. Today I'm joined by my guest Tim Bauer. Tim is a solution architect for OT and BAS solutions. And today we're going to talk about cybersecurity for building management and specifically automation systems, which is a subject Tim is a specialist in. But I'll just pass over to Tim now to give a quick introduction and explain how he got into OT before we get stuck into our main subject. So over to you, Tim, and a pleasure to have you on board today for the podcast.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me. And hello to everybody out there. As David said, I'm specialized in security and availability around operational technology and building automation systems. What do I have to say about myself? I've been in IT engineering and consulting for almost 2 decades now, from support and infrastructure to networking and security. And basically, I would say once across the whole shop floor of IT. And for the last 10 plus years, my work has focused almost entirely on operational technology, industrial security, and building automation. So I can say I have seen a lot. And most recently, I had the chance to build and lead consulting teams in the OT space. Yes.
Okay, great. Thanks for that, Tim. Sounds like you're going to share some really good insights today. Obviously got a wealth of experience. So let's get started. Let's get stuck into our main topics. Firstly, when people hear the term sort of building automation, Tim, what does that mean exactly? Many people still think of this in probably a classical sense with building services, but what are we really talking about, Tim? I think it's probably worth clarifying that, especially when the industry speaks about sort of smart buildings. What exactly does that term mean to you? And obviously just kind of elaborate on that and kick us off on that subject, I suppose.
Yes, I will do that. Thank you. Building automation is basically, I would say, what makes a building work in a coordinated way. We are talking about technical stuff like heating, ventilation, cooling, or energy systems, and the technical stuff that keeps a building running day to day. And when people say smart building, that often sounds, to be honest, bigger than it really is. In practice, it mostly means just more connectivity, more software and hardware, more data and more systems talking to each other. And I usually try to put it like this. Buildings used to have technical systems. Now they also have some sort of digital layer that ties everything together. And once that digital layer becomes important for operations, it stops being just a comfort feature. It becomes critical infrastructure for the building. So to me, a building isn't smart because it has a nice dashboard. It's smart when the systems are actually connected. And that's exactly where the real dependency starts. And that is a good overview of building automation and how the dependency is in the context of smart building.
Okay, great. So you make a clear point there about sort of building automation and building management systems and how they're related to OT. Why is that distinction so important, Tim, from your perspective?
Because building automation systems directly affect the physical world. That is my key point when I'm doing security assessments and the mitigation methods behind it. So if a system is controlling, for example, airflow or temperature or pressure, then we are not talking about classical office IT, I would say, anymore. We are talking about operational technology. And I think people sometimes miss that because it's happening in a building, not in a factory or on a production site. And there's no production line, no robots, no big industrial machines. But technically, the logic is exactly the same. You have in a building sensors, actors, controllers, and all of that has a direct impact on real operations. And that is really important for me because building automation is OT. And just because it sits in a building, it doesn't make it less operational.
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean. I think I've probably made that mistake myself in the past of not thinking of it like that. Because being a recruiter, I've worked, I think even about 10 years ago, helped certain people or certain companies rather recruit for smart buildings. And a lot of it was always to do with connectivity or putting in Wi-Fi or something related to IT infrastructure. But I didn't always think of it before I kind of got into becoming a specialist OT recruiter. I wouldn't have thought of it like that. You think of a power plant or critical infrastructure, you wouldn't necessarily think of it in an office building, could you? But it's still, I suppose, if you're attacked or you have anything like that, it can still have a significant impact on the company or the business and shut things down, can't it?
Definitely. And hopefully, after this episode, you will walk through buildings with another eye open, I would say.
Yeah.
And 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 you already talked about building functions. Think about airports, train stations, or hospitals. That is almost only building automation that keeps the operation flowing in those buildings.
Mm. Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah, especially a place like a hospital or an airport. It doesn't have to be a factory, does it, for it to obviously be extremely important. Okay, that's great. Well, thanks for clarifying that, Tim. Do you think, in your opinion, a lot of people still treat cybersecurity and building automation as something separate or somehow special? Why do you think OT security in this space follows the same principles I mean, you sort of just touched on it, but is any other OT environment, or is there any distinct nuances to kind of building automation if you compare it to a kind of other areas of OT, which might be more classically associated with it, I suppose?
As I said, building automation is OT. I think we have to see that the security challenges are basically the same as in any other OT environment. You still need to know what assets you have. You still need to understand the communication paths. You still need segmentation, secure remote access, proper permissions, of course. The names of the systems may be a bit different. The vendors may be different, but the underlying questions are exactly the same. And to be honest, I think building automation was treated for a long time as if it were somehow outside the normal OT discussion, whatever that is. But it really isn't. These are connected operational systems with long life cycles, external services, and that's not really unusual. So I would frame it as a special. I would frame it not as a special cybersecurity topic. I would frame it as a normal OT security topic that finally needs to be taken seriously in buildings as well. And when I think about building automation and security concerns, we got one thing that is very different to classic OT. I use it by myself, but as I said, what is that? But there's something different. You cannot close the door and say behind that's OT. In building automation, you want many users, mostly outside the administrative organization, to use those systems. So you bring attack vectors as easy as accessible, because people outside the organization should use that. And that's something very different to production facilities, for example.
Yeah. Okay. And what are some of the, as a solution architect yourself, Tim, what are some of the biggest challenges like right now that, say, your customers are facing, or some of the biggest challenges you're being asked to tackle in terms of solutions you're developing? Because there's obviously a lot going on in the world geopolitically and other things like that. And that's obviously does have an effect when we talk about OT security. There's obviously certain threats associated with what's happening in the world. Do you see any trends like that in your particular space around sort of building automation? Is there any particular threats or challenges, I suppose, you're seeing in general?
the requirements for building operations or for buildings under construction, for example, are getting the first time they are asking for cybersecurity. I'm in the space for particularly in building automation for more than 10 years now, and it's the first time they are seeing those requirements for cybersecurity, and that brings facility management, building operators, or construction teams to new questions, I would say. And for the first time as well, it's needed to have how put it easy, to have budget for it and to think about it in the construction process. And if you talk about security challenge, I would say if I want to attack an organization, I wouldn't go for the highly expensive firewall or next gen systems. I would go for the system that is steering the data center where this firewall is installed in. So we have old systems, we have attack vectors that are not on the map for all those risk assessments and for all those security mitigations that we are already doing. And that makes it very clear that we have some sort of a blind spot. So that is a challenge for those teams who are responsible. And on the other side, where they ask the questions, there are facility management, for example, we don't have those, we don't factoring those cybersecurity concerns in their everyday work. They get hit by those questions and say, what are they talking about?
Yeah, so if I understand that correctly, going back to the point where you started, so you're seeing that demand almost sort of like a blueprint stage of new buildings now, rather than kind of build the building and then worry about cybersecurity after. It's sort of like there's more focus on this. There's a lot more awareness around the need for this from the start and embedding it, within a building. So in terms of like, I suppose if you think of a building of a living, breathing thing, it's helping put those systems in place to protect it from the start. Is that being driven by things like NIS2, Tim, or certain regulations, or is that just a general, I suppose, evolution of this market? People are just becoming more aware, or is it more people are doing it to meet certain regulations? What do you think? What's sort of the main driver in the gaps maybe that you're seeing there? Yeah.
I would say it comes from two directions. NIS2 is something that we have to talk about, should talk about, and for example, building operators and facility management have to talk about more about regulations like NIS2. And the other thing is buildings have to be optimized more and more. They need to be more efficient. And that is something that comes with more digital layers, with more systems, and therefore more building automation. And if you ask about NIS2 in particular, I would say a lot of buildings out there are already digital buildings, but they are not organized like for digital operators, I would say. Yeah. The technology seems to have moved on and the regulations are coming after.
Okay. And how, just pure curious about this point in terms of, do you see a lot of legacy requirement, like traditional older buildings, like a hospital or an airport maybe is a good example that you referenced before? How easy is it to go in, put in OT systems or automation systems into an existing building versus a new build? Like, I imagine it's slightly easier to get those systems in place for a new building than it is a kind of what you might call a legacy building or an old building. Am I correct?
Yes, you're correct. It's much easier to have a green field, of course, and the modernization of existing buildings in terms of building automation. There are two things you have to look for. One thing is, of course, you have most of the time 24/7 operations, so a building is always there and always used in some sort of way. And that doesn't make it easy to change systems. And another thing is, most of the time, buildings in particular are not making money. The processes inside are needed to get your business done, and therefore modernization has to be cost effective to be done. Yeah.
Okay. Always comes back to cost, doesn't it? So,
definitely.
Yeah. Good. And I think you were saying before about building automation planners have taken on two huge domains, automation and IT. Sort of firstly, how did that happen, and why is that becoming such a problem in kind of the projects you're seeing today?
Everything we talked about by now is mostly done by building automation planners. So someone would say, you talked about IT and OT. Why is that done by automation planners? Because modern building automation doesn't stop at automation anymore. The minute you start talking about IP networks, central platforms, or remote access interfacing, you're already dealing with IT and OT related architecture things, and in a lot of projects that I've seen or that I'm doing, that work just ends up with the building automation planner, because not someone formally decided that, but because somebody has to make the whole thing fit together. So suddenly the planner is expected to understand automation, IT, OT, cybersecurity, the whole operational requirements and the service models behind it, basically the whole picture. And that's where I would say the imbalance comes from. The responsibility has grown so massively, but let's call it the mandate or the budget, once again cost, and the project setup often have not caught up. So that's why I sometimes say building automation planners quietly took on two huge domains at once, automation and IT, and a lot of clients still haven't fully realized it. And I think we can guess what that means for quality of those plannings for those two huge domains.
Okay. And this is where you help, Tim, basically, in your work. Yeah.
That's what I'm trying to do, exactly.
And where do you see these, I suppose, if you call it a problem, or these issues arising most? Is it within a particular type of customer or sector, like particular type of buildings? Where do you see the most challenges?
The most challenges I see in the field of critical infrastructure, because there you have the regulation in place for now, and my project starts always with critical building processes, I would say, and there it comes often to that point that it's seen that building automation planning has changed through the years, and that it's a big part of it is IT and network planning. And then we get the mandate, we get the budget, and for critical infrastructure, I would say it works. But with, you said it, the NIS2 directive, for example, many other organizations, many other buildings, in my terms, will be impacted by the same challenges and questions.
Good. Well, look, thank you for your time on this, Tim. Is there any other points you'd like to add, Tim, in terms of this subject? I've just kind of giving you the floor, I suppose, before we maybe wrap up. Is there any other specific points you'd like to raise, or anything that you think is important maybe for listeners if they're working within this space, or maybe considering getting deeper into it themselves, or any particular companies for that matter?
Okay. I will keep it short. I can say what baffles me the most. I would say a lot of operators have very digital buildings, but absolutely not a digital operating model, and that has to change in the next years to keep up the speed run where processes need a good base, and those bases are mostly buildings. And if that could be done, that would be great.
Cool. Well, look, thank you very, very much for your time, Tim. Some really good insights in there. It's actually quite a short episode, this, but really concise discussion around some of these topics within building automation. So I really appreciate that, and we're having you on the podcast. It's been really interesting. Are you happy if anybody listening wants to reach out and connect with you, Tim? Is that okay for you?
Absolutely. Reach out to me. Would be great.
Brilliant.
And David, for you, if you want, we can do a technical deep dive in another episode.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be fantastic. Something to do maybe in a follow-up episode, if you like. So yeah, good idea, Tim. But look, thank you for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast and for you to share your experience and insights. So yeah, finally, thanks again, Tim.
Thank you very much, David. It was fun.